Good morning, mushrooms, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, brothers, sisters, mothers, misters, and all my cousins out there in the greater world. It's time to plug in, get this train a chugging, because there's a lot of meat on them bones today. As you know, protests continue because we've got stuff going on in America. Protests over the tragic killing of George Floyd at the hands, or actually more correctly, at the knees of a police officer. And so now police departments around the country and policing in general is facing a lot of backlash from the public. And in response to that, though, the police unions are digging in. And nice, as usual, very visual vocabulary. And this actually comes from basically the military, the army. When in battle, soldiers would dig a hole so that way they're not exposed to the enemy fire. We call those typically foxholes for one or two people, from which then they can shoot from a safe position. However, if you make that hole into a long channel, that is called a trench. They are digging in to fortify their position. They are not changing their tactics. They're doubling down, they're leaning into their position, recycling vocabulary left and right this morning. You can tell that I am indeed highly caffeinated, and so why not have some more? They are digging in, they are not moving, they're not changing their tactics, they are fortifying their position because of their entrenched ideology. Remember, like I said, they dig the foxholes or they dig a trench to fortify their position. Like World War I was predominantly trench warfare. Yes, well, now these unions are entrenching themselves. Ooh. Or similarly, if somebody is trying to change your mind, we could say that you dig in your heels because they're trying to pull you in some direction and you're putting your heels down to stop yourself from being moved. On the YouTube recap, I'm going to throw up a picture of our puppy as we were trying to pull him out of the park last night. He wasn't exactly digging in his heels, but similarly protesting his removal from the play area. Either way, on to the caption here. In the wake of recent protests, I just learned that this term wake here actually comes from Old Norse, and that makes sense because they were seafaring folk. And behind, as a ship moves through the water, then it creates a V-shaped wave pattern behind it. And so if something is happening in the wake of something else, it's happening after it because it's inside that V that follows behind the boat, and not only behind it, after it, but also as a direct consequence of it. However, typically here we use it for after something bad and as a result of something bad. You could say, in the wake of the tragedy, he turned to alcohol to solve his problems. He started spiraling downwards, lost his job, became homeless, and died lonely and unhappy on the street. In the wake of recent protests, following and as a result of, powerful labor unions are preparing for a once-in-a-generation showdown over policing. And a showdown is a final argument or a competition or a battle between two forces to make the final, see who is the winner. If you watch Vikings, the final showdown in the battle for Paris, the final showdown where at the end of Price is Right, there's this showcase showdown where the two final contestants battle to win the final showcase. Unfortunately, that's probably not the case here, and no one's going to win, and I'm sure it won't be the final battle. Yeah, once in a generation. I mean, you had it back in the 60s, and then as well in the 90s after the Rodney King verdict, well, the beating and the verdict. And, well, guess what? It's coming up again. Things are coming to a head. Yeah, the jerk who killed George Floyd, his bail has been set at $1.25 million. And so we've got a reduced present perfect passive has been set to establish something, much like we set goals or set alarms. It has been established. And bail, as you know from previous weeks, we often talk about bailouts, right? And it's a financial rescue package often for companies or countries going bankrupt, and so they give them money so that way they don't stop functioning. In this case, bail, to bail someone out still of jail. And so it's to get them out of jail at least temporarily while awaiting their trial or sentencing. So they're not being held in prison for the whole time. I don't know where he's safer, on the streets or in jail. But typically, police officers don't fare well in jail. Reckoning over Floyd's death and calls to defund the police. Oh, that's all the subject here. Challenge Trump and Biden. Challenge here is the verb. Reckoning, thinking about, evaluating, or then also we have the day of reckoning, the final day of judgment in which you're called before the Creator so he can determine if you go up or you go down. But here it's really just thinking about things, making evaluative judgments, thinking about stuff, maybe what side of the line you stand on over Floyd's death, and calls to defund the police. People have been calling for a defunding or calling to defund the police because, well, they're using a lot of this funding for military training, military equipment, and they, as you've seen, have been abusing. It's an interesting subject, though, because you can't really do without police. I don't really know where this conversation is going to go. So stay tuned. I'll keep you posted. Surprise! America can't follow rules because freedom! Nearly half of all U.S. states see jumps in coronavirus cases because, you know, who's gonna tell me to wear a mask and who I can or can't talk to? States have been reopening prematurely, but then also a lot of people shouting, spreading aerosolized particles of the virus in close proximity, not observing social distancing. Yeah, of course, we're gonna see some transmission rates and infections jump. That's that. Moving on. Tally. Count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A tally, 2 tally. Just think of the song made popular by Beetlejuice, the famous Jamaican dockworker song. Hey, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. Yeah, and that was literally about people loading bananas onto boats, and the tally man would come at the end of the night and count how much had been loaded, and so they knew whether or not they could go home. A tally is a count, a number. 2 tally is 2 count. Here, I've got a scorecard. You can see right there some tally marks in a little competition I'm having with one of my students regarding trivia. That's right, I'm winning. But yes, a count, 2 count. And actually it comes archaically, etymologically from a stick. And it was a special stick, and you'd put little marks on the stick with your sword or your knife, and then that stick would be broken in half, and so each party would carry half of the stick, so that way they could then compare accounts. It was an accounting or record-keeping tool. Wow, there we got some etymological trivia for you today. And now, aliens. If only, if only. Come save us. Another mysterious radio burst. A burst is like an eruption. Yeah, and so it could be a repetitive burst. Oh, and look, it is a repeating pattern. It could be an SOS. Yes, it's a repeating pattern coming from space. Could it be a sign of intelligent life? Or maybe just another form of pulsar or quasar or other czar. Not like Tsar Nicholas, though. I don't know. Always interesting. Keep us posted, scientists. Here's a sad, sad story that we're seeing far too often. 8-year-old boy was handcuffed, reduced passive, by New York Police Department for carrying a stick. Come on, we're trying to get our kids to go outside and play with things instead of having all these video games and other fancy toys. We always say, go outside, play with some dirt, a stick and a ball. Well, the boy was carrying a stick, and now he was handcuffed by the police because I'm sure this 8-year-old was rioting and a real menace to society. Menace, menacing. Probably be a fairly traumatic experience. And what do you want to bet that boy wasn't white? Yeah. And now we've had so many phrasal verbs and phrases with call recently in these headlines. But here we've got a new one. A school called off Ivanka's commencement speech, her graduation speech. To call something off means to cancel it. You can call off an event. My friends, unfortunately, well, they're still getting married, but they've had to call off the celebration for now due to lack of ability to travel and coronavirus. It canceled her graduation speech that she was going to give at the school, and see what she blamed. It's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault. But of course, it has nothing to do with her own self or her father and their policies and positions. Duh, it's not my fault. Who you calling a snowflake? Go blame somebody else. Here's where we stand on getting a vaccine. Here's where we stand. What's our position? What's the lie of the land? Are we near this, near that? Are we getting closer? Are we still in the same place? Who knows? What's our position? Where we stand on getting something? U.S. prosecutors seek an interview with Prince so-and-so regarding his link to Jeffrey Epstein, that demented pervert. Seek we've had before, and it's look for and try to get. It's like a quest. And so they're officially wanting an interview. Whether or not they will get it and whether or not anything would happen anyway, that's a different story, because he is, well, Prince. And as we know, royalty rarely gets punished, except for in the old days when they chopped off their heads. All right, brands now cut ties with CrossFit over the CEO's tweets. Now we're starting to see where some of these brands, where they stand on the issues, because the CrossFit guy is a jerk and he tweeted out some nasty stuff, and so Reebok and many gyms that have franchised that name or bought rights to it are now canceling their subscriptions because you don't want to give money to jerks, right? Right. And that's the thing. Nowadays, sure, maybe we still arguably live in democracies. Sadly, though, some of the best ways we can leverage our power is with our wallets. And so that's one of the best ways to try and change society: consumer activism. They're cutting their ties, they're severing their connections, no longer attached to it and officially not associated with each other. The World Bank delivers a grim economic forecast. Just like we can predict the weather, we can predict economic situations coming up here in the future, and they are grim. We've had it many times on the show because most of the time the news, the headlines are quite grim. And it means sad, dark, depressing, scary, completely devoid of any humor whatsoever. Much like the guy with the hood and the farming tool who comes to harvest your soul, the Grim Reaper. Not a lot of comedy with him. Okay, moving on. Another great phrasal verb as a noun, a comeback, and a collocation, to make a comeback. You'll have an athlete or a celebrity that is for a while out of the light, out of the spotlight, but then they come back, ta-da, into the public view. Or perhaps an athlete is injured, and so he hasn't been playing in the games, in the matches. He's had to sit out on the sidelines until he recovers from his injury, or her injury, sorry about that. Then eventually, once he has recovered, he or she has recovered, he then comes back, and if you're making a huge comeback, then it means you're being very effective and you're doing a great job. And so, to come back, a comeback from injury, defeat, etc. So Airbnb is making a huge comeback. How? Why? I don't know, because I don't want to sleep in a bed where I don't know who's been in there and catch some weird... Well, I mean, there was always the threat of bed bugs, but now it's getting a little bit more serious. All right, here we go. Losing jobs in different ways. Cops who were fired by their bosses or resigned said, okay, I'm done here. And often people are forced to resign or pushed to resign. But why these cops? They were pushed to resign or were fired over misconduct. The prefix mis meaning incorrectly or badly. So they were behaving badly. The result of their bad behavior, they were left without a job. And of course, Florida Police Organization offers to hire them because, well, Florida. Now, if you're not up to speed on Florida, just follow it. Google Florida Man, and you'll understand the jokes. More resignations. The Bon Appetit editor-in-chief is resigning after a brown-faced photo sparks anger. As always, anger is heat, and sparks, that's what starts fires, right? And so to start something, to spark a conversation or to spark anger, blackface, brownface, people are still doing this? Unbelievable. Especially an editor of a magazine. Yes, something tells me he's probably being forced to resign. And bye-bye. For whatever reason, despite jumping, spiking, skyrocketing corona cases and nearly 20% unemployment, US stocks are surging like a wave, moving forward and upward and erasing, wiping out the losses previously experienced so far this year. I don't understand how, I really don't understand how the US stock market could be doing so well, considering all of the stuff that's going on. So I mean, they're getting back to a break-even point, but at the same time, it's not like they're really making improvements. When people don't have jobs and don't have that much money, it's not like they're buying that many things. I don't know. Not been following the stock market or economic data too closely. If you know, let me know. All right. Colin Powell just called out every Republican in Congress to call somebody out, to publicly point the finger and often sort of shame them or accuse them of something so as to change their behavior. They're being called out for hypocrisy. They're being called out for racism. They're being called out for, well, basically not defending the Constitution, which they have sworn to defend. And well done, Colin Powell. Was never a big fan of you, but you're getting a thumbs up today, buddy. Biden embraces his new role as healer-in-chief. Now, the president we often refer to as the commander-in-chief because he is ultimately the head of all the military. And so we add the in-chief to many things, meaning the leader of that for the company. Of the country. But yeah, and so he's embracing the role. As we've had before, embrace literally means hug, but in this case it means to accept the job or accept the role, accept the idea, accept the ideology, the beliefs, the tactics, and then make it your own. Yeah, much like adopting, but embracing especially warmly because, well, hugs are nice and warm. Military spouses across the U.S. organize and march in support of Black Lives Matter, which is interesting because Trump was calling in the military to squash the protests and to fight against the protesters. And, well, the husbands and wives around the U.S. of those very soldiers are marching with the Black Lives Matter. And so, interesting contradiction and so on. Moving on. Good phrase here. And we like it, especially because it rhymes. Top congressional Democrats steer clear of defund the police rhetoric. All of this talk, all of this speech to defund the police, ultimately that could ostracize some voters and turn those voters against them. And so they don't want to step too far in that direction. And so they're trying to soften the language and they're not going towards it. Literally, they're grabbing the steering wheel of the car and like, we're going to go that way and avoid that obstacle or that, well, you could say pitfall, but I was trying to think of, yes, pothole. When there's a hole in the street, because it's round and it's deep, like a pot, we call those potholes. And so they're steering clear of it. They're trying to avoid that discussion or at least soften it a bit, which will also then, of course, anger other people. And so, yes, as a politician, I'm sure it's not easy. You always have to walk a fine line and balance the priorities and the thoughts and feelings of your constituency. All right, selfies, I'm just not a huge fan of them. But so now we need to make group selfies from a distance. Just a phrasal verb meaning investigating. They're thinking about it and they're trying to see how to do it, how it can be done. Just like I'm looking into more things that I can do for you, not necessarily on this show, but on others. Any input? Let me know. I'm all ears. Here we go. Scientists who are backed by Zuckerberg's foundation. Yeah, so we got a reduced relative clause and a passive. Scientists who are backed by his foundation. So his foundation is giving them financial support. However, they are urging him to change his position on stuff. So really, they, by protesting against him, the person who's funding them, they are risking that he might withhold funding, not give them any more, or withdraw funding, take it away from them. But apparently their moral thoughts and beliefs are stronger than the need for his money, because maybe their work is important enough and they can get their money from other sources. Much like we don't want to buy from people who we don't believe in, they don't want to work for or accept money from people they don't believe in. I admire their moral courage and fortitude, and I stand with them. So they're urging him, they're persistently persuading, come on, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. Yeah, they're trying to persuade him in a persistent, insistent, come on, buddy, sort of way, and to change his stance. His stance, his position. A stance is just the way you stand. You can have an aggressive stance. You can have just kind of a cool, relaxed stance, where you could be crouching or squatting. Lots of different physical stances, but in this case, we mean the position on a topic, for or against. Yeah? Or somewhere in between, because, you know, not everything is black and white. Life is nothing but shades of gray. Generally. And I believe that's our third resign for today. And the Reddit co-founder resigns from his position on the board of the company and urges, wow, look at that, back-to-back urges his seat on the board. Yeah, he urges that his seat be filled by a black candidate. So he's urging that his job then is given to or taken over by a person of color. And so that's great. We've got a nice passive here, and lovely. He is Serena's husband. Really? I had no idea. All right, that's news to me. It's nice to see him taking a stand for something that he believes in. Yeah, cool. So, some good stuff today. Sorry if I went too quick. Don't blame me, blame the caffeine. But then again, the caffeine was my choice. Those were the headlines for today. What just happened there? I do not know. And so for English Otherwise, that was breaking down the news today, Tuesday, the 9th of June. I said it wrong yesterday. And so, yeah, as always, thanks for any sort of follows, likes, subscribes, hearts, bells, whistles, thumbs up, comments, questions, complaints, compliments, quandaries, queries, and anything else you might think of. Maybe it's not your thing, but please do pass us along to a friend. Help the world become a better place on so many different levels. And so, well, if I don't see you sooner, I'll see you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Thanks a lot, much love, and bye-bye. Stop the stream. Yes, oh my.